Peace, greetings to you all. It is your brother Naheem, BKA Lord Abba, aka Mr. Just the Facts. Tonight we are doing our first Be the Power Book Club, The Devil You Know by Charles M. Blow. This was a powerful read. And what made it a powerful read is the fact that it is a powerful strategy. So everybody, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you share this video out. If you would like to support the channel, use the super chat. You could cash app us at Be the Power using the cash app handle Be the Power. You can also become a member via Patreon. And do remember, we are having a fundraiser for our Juneteenth reparations rally in Atlanta, Georgia. So, that's something that we're hoping everybody can pull up to, because we're going to have a real powerful event that day. So hit if it's your first time coming to the channel, make sure you hit subscribe, hit that little bell icon next to the subscribe button so that you can become a part of the notification nation. Shout out to everybody that's listening in to the chat. Shout out to the BTP mods on deck. So I kind of want to get into this, like right into this thing, because this was a powerful book. And the book first caught my attention due to the fact that Charles Blow was doing an interview. I can't remember on which platform. And, usually I see certain individuals and I'll be like, it's one of them liberals or one of them conservatives, right? I just don't be wanting to hear what they have to say. But there was something that made me stop at that video. And he was discussing this new Southern strategy of relocating back to the South. And it completely caught my attention. And at the time, I don't think the book was published yet. I don't think so. And as soon as it became available, I hopped on it. I mean, me and Josh were the first two out the crew. We jumped on it. And I mean, like I said, this was a powerful read. So there are 6 chapters. So I want to read the 6 chapters. One is the introduction. I mean, that starts the book. That's the introduction. That's not one of the chapters. The first chapter is the past as a prologue. The second chapter is the proposition. The third chapter is called the push. The fourth chapter is called the pull, the power of density. The 5th chapter is called the end of hoping and waiting. And the 6th chapter is called the reunion. So let me pull my brothers up here. Hey, bros, if y'all want to give just a brief little intro about what you thought about the book. Let's do that before we start. Well, what were your thoughts about this book?
Go ahead, Brother Graham.
Yeah, peace, bro. I didn't hear the last part of your transmission.
Yeah, I was asking what did you think about this book? What was your thoughts after reading it?
Man, I can't say enough about that book, man. Enough good things about the book, because the way that Mr. Blow basically put the book together, it's, of course, everyone knows he's a journalist that works for the New York Times, right? He put the book together, man, in a real manageable, easy way to read and to understand the concepts that he's bringing forward. He basically put and told various stories of things that happened throughout the North and the South to basically paint a picture of why, as you termed it, this Southern strategy was so great and powerful, man. But it was a great book, man. I loved the book. I loved reading it. It took me back in time to places, and it made me reconsider certain things that I knew, but I really didn't vocalize or put, excuse me, emphasis on. So it was an all-around good book.
Also, you're a Louisiana native as well, so he, you know, him being born in Louisiana, you know, I figured that some of what he brought forth would kind of have an effect on you in a certain type of way. And then he was basically living in New York, where I'm from. So he gives us this northern and southern perspective in almost a perfect way, right? What was your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was, you know, he basically lived this experience. And like we were talking about on the phone, I think the other day, you know, Mr. Blow lived this experience. And, you know, his education, his working for the New York Times, his HBCU experience, his professional experiences showed the necessity of this thing and the necessity of this Southern strategy. He experienced the hardships of the South. He experienced the hardships of the North, and or more specifically, the hypocrisy of the North as this bastion of liberal ideas and liberal concepts and liberal civilization. And he basically, for all intents and purposes, exposed the hypocrisy and the well-hidden hypocrisy of, I'm gonna go say, civilization, of the northern civilization. I mean, it was all around excellent. I'm pretty sure as the show go on, we gonna get deeper into it. So I don't want to say too much, man. But as we go into it, but it was a well put together book, man. I mean, like Sister Cynthia said, it was very well written. And it basically, man, appealed to me because I'm gonna say this again, that this Southern strategy of enough of contingency of Black people coming back to the South, man, that's not only good for Black people, but it's good for the country. The objective is to gain more political power in state houses and on the federal level as far as Congress and in the Senate. And with that being said, it's good for America, all around good for America. And the reason I'm kind of like frozen in my thoughts because I want to say so much.
All right, so look.
Black people.
Yeah. All right, guys, say that part.
Yeah, Black people are basically the voice of conscience for this country. So a move for Black people to gain political power by infusing the South with their presence will free not only Black people, but white people and everybody else too, because we the moral voice of this country. So it ain't gonna be a Black supremacy, so to speak. But it will be Black power, but Black power for the benefit of all. Because like I say, right, man, we conscious of this thing, yo.
That's right. Brother, yeah, Josh, but before you go, Josh, let me just remark that I thought this was an excellently written book, right?
Took the words out of my mouth.
Okay. You know, when I was reading the first chapter and the introduction in the first chapter, I'm a reader. I like pattern. I like to try to peep people's patterns. I try to peep people's methodologies. I'm not academically trained. I grew up in the housing projects of New York City, point blank, period. I'm an autodidact. I'm self-taught in many areas. And I always look for reading patterns. And this book was written very, very well. It had a early 1900s feel. You know them intellectuals from the early 1900s? It had that type of feel to it in the beginning, right? He levels it out as he goes through the book, but that beginning of it, I thought it caught my attention, and I was hooked for the rest of the way. But go ahead, Josh, tell the people real quick what you thought about the book, and then we're gonna start reading some chapters some excerpts from the book, and then get deeper into this discussion.
Yeah, the book to me, it was, I have to say, I can't say it the same way y'all said. I got to put my own spin. So it was written in a superb way. You know, it was written in a superb fashion, and I gotta just say, it's one of those that when you're reading it, it's hard to like stop. The only reason I would stop would be like my AirPods would die or something, or you know, I would just get tired, and I'm like, you know what, I need to actually go back and, because what I did was I bought the book on Audible. I used one of my Audible credits. Then I got it on Kindle too, because I want to be able to listen to it. And then certain places though, I gotta stop and I gotta mark it up. I gotta get the notes. And a lot of times I went back and listened to and read through chapters like 2 or 3 times, you know, because I wanted to make sure I really synthesized the ideas. Book was actually, it was a superbly written book. It flowed almost like you would watch like a documentary or something like that, like a full program visually, you know. And it was a good mix of stories, you know, from individuals, examples that set up the proposal that I thought were right on point. And then, you know, the way he communicated the factors of push and pull.
Oh yeah,
that's a very simple concept for everybody to grasp, right? And it also leaves it open for us to like build ideas around how to make it a reality. So, you know, hey, let's get into it.
Yes. So I want to start by reading a few excerpts. These were what I thought, and I was reading them to the brothers earlier, and I guess we were in agreement on, because of how powerful they are, I wanted to open with these 3 excerpts. This is from page 26. So yeah, I'll start from here. He says, and yet the initial benefits of the Great Migration have given way in many ways to a stinging failure, a dashing of hopes, and an overwhelming feeling of betrayal. Unrest in these former destination cities, more than in southern cities, is continuously exhaled as a roar of disappointment, a sometimes violent reflex to a broken promise. We saw it manifest in the first wave of Black Lives Matter protests in 2014 and 2015 in places like Ferguson and Baltimore, in Chicago and New York, and in a second wave in the summer of 2020 in cities around the country, including southern cities and indeed around the world. But even the tone and tenor of protests, I believe, can diverge by people's connection to land and lineage. I thought this part was so powerful. Me being a New Yorker, right? He said, generally speaking, Black people in destination cities. Now, let me make clear what he means by destination cities, family. When he says destination cities, he means the places that we fled from, right? And wound up at. My family, from my mother's side and my father's side, were from South Carolina. So New York is the destination city, right? So just to give y'all some a meaning of a definition of what he means by destination city. So he says, generally speaking, Black people in destination cities have a more transient attachment to place. You just heard me say I'm a New Yorker, right? A lot of people in the South may, especially when building with someone from the North, particularly New York City, they might just come out and say, I'm from the South. I'll say I'm from New York. If Logic was on, Logic, I'm from Chicago. Ali was on, he'd be like, I'm from New York, right? A lot of people, when I encounter them from the North, but from the South, they will say, I'm from the South. And I always have to ask where. And then they tell me where in the South that they're from. He says there, meaning the destination cities, in my case, New York City, family lineage is often only a few decades old, if that. And many young people are newly transplanted. Their sensibilities rooted more in urbanity than in legacy, right? I will scream out in a heartbeat. I'm from Hamels Projects, Far Rockaway, Queens. I was raised by the streets, baby. Right? But that's that New Yorkness. That's that New York right there. He hits this thing out of the park. He really hits this thing out of the park. He says, they are relatively young communities, which they are, because the housing projects that I lived in was once damn near all European or all white people, I should say. Then it turned black, starting in the 60s and the 70s. But at first, it was all white people living there. So he says, they are relatively young communities with constant infusions of new energy, volatile energy that pulses. When I read this, being from New York City, I can only really give you that perspective. I thought about the Jamaicans, the Haitians, the Puerto Ricans, even though Puerto Ricans are technically Americans, right? But the Dominicans being in New York, there's a different array of ethnicities. So he goes on to say, the South lacks that level of combustible dynamism. The people who remained in the South are more likely to continue to stay put. Take my home state of Louisiana, for example. Nearly 4 out of 5 residents were born in that state, a figure that hasn't changed much over the past century. In Louisiana and in the South writ large, race must be reckoned with head on. In large measure, your townspeople, white or black, were your mother's townspeople and will be your children's townspeople. See, it's not like that in New York. It's not like that in those cities because we're relatively young communities. I'm going to skip down to this excerpt where he says, the conclusion I have come to is simply this. Racism behaves the way racism behaves. Racism wasn't and isn't geography dependent, but proximity and scale dependent. Black people fled the horrors of the racist South for the so-called liberal cities of the North and West, trading the devil they knew for the devil they didn't, only to come to the painful realization that the devil is the devil. As Julian Bond once put it, America, after all, unscrambled spells I am race. I thought that was powerful. I'm going to read this next excerpt and then I'm going to open it up to the bros and then we'll go from there. So this is on page 32. This is coming from chapter 2 of the proposition. And he says this, considered another way, 44% of black people in America now live outside the South. However, hypothetically speaking, if just half of them moved back south and were strategically arrayed, it would be enough to make black people the largest racial group in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina, a contiguous band of black power that would upend America's political calculus and exponentially increase black political influence. There were only 3 black U.S. senators in the 116th Congress, only one of whom is from the South, Republican Tim Scott of South Carolina, and he's no representation to us at all, who received a scant 8% of the black vote in the state when he ran in 2016. Case in point. The other 2 were Kamala Harris of California, where black voters formed only 6% of those voting in 2016, and Cory Booker of New Jersey, where black people constitute 13.1% of those voting, according to exit polls. all three of those black senators were elected by white people, meaning white people were either a majority or plurality of the coalitions that swept them into power, according to exit polls. In fact, as of 2020, in the entire 230-year history of the Senate, black people have never popularly elected a senator on their own or been the majority of a coalition that did so. There have only been 10 African-American senators, and they have all either been appointed or elected by white people. So, bros, let's touch on that a little bit. That he's making some powerful observations, and he's not drawing from his own, whims. He's citing the exit polls. Only 10. What did it say? 10 black senators. Let me see. 10 African-American senators in all of our history here in America. What did y'all think of that?
Absolutely absurd. One of the things, go ahead, Grim. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Josh. I was just saying.
I was going to say, one of the things that I thought about that was, he brought up another point in there where he was saying, you actually just mentioned, we said none of them were elected by us. Think about that. Even like we want to talk about the Reconstruction era, right? None of those people were elected by us, like having a majority vote of the popular vote or via plurality. So as much as we want to give like us our flowers or whatever, people want to give us the credit for electing Warnock, that's a farce, because we didn't elect him as a majority. We didn't elect him as a majority or plurality or whatever. We contributed, and our numbers coming out as an increased voter base contributed to him winning that seat, right? But we didn't, like, it wasn't a situation if everybody else would have voted against him, we could have still put him in there. Like, because in our history here in America, we've had candidates that we probably would definitely want to run, but they wouldn't even make it to the final part. Like, they wouldn't make it out of a primary, you know what I mean? Much less make it to actually winning the Senate seat. So I think that's just absurd when you think about it. And it also goes to show you that it's no way that you can yield any power once people get in there. If, for us, if once they get in there, they don't do the bidding of whoever put them in there, the people that voted them in there, or the people that's contributing to that campaign. Because if they don't do that bidding, those people just vote them up out of there. And see, if we had the numbers that we should have, or that we could have, if we would have if we stayed in the South, or we could have if people move back, we will be the ones that will be able to vote them people up out of there and vote the people we need up in there.
Facts, Brother Grim.
Yes, and I just wanted to follow up with what Josh said. I agree with that. But basically, the bottom line of Charles Blow putting out these numbers is showing that Black political power via voting power is basically diluted, so to speak. And it's diluted due to the fact of the so-called Great Migration, or really what we at BTP call the Great Escape. And it's funny that how we put this Freedmen term, or resurrected this Freedmen term, and put it on the map, right? And then Mr. Charles Blow come out with this book, because, man, I see how all this stuff is tied together in one straight line with the rope, with slavery, us being freed, the Great Migration, because we have to talk about for a second why did all of these black people leave the South? That is basically tied 100% to the freedmen's effort to get away from the violence of the olden Confederates who had lost the war but had reestablished their power in the South in the form of Jim Crow. So they were killing our people, they were killing politicians, they were overturning legal and lawful elections. You know, that same spirit is here today, right? That's why they went into January 6th. That's why they went into the Capitol building.
That's right.
And basically, our people was like, man, this country did not deliver what it promised, particularly in this region. So our people had to go to Chicago. They had to go to Philadelphia, and they had to go to New York, and even to upper regions of the South, St. Louis, and so on and so forth, to escape the brutality of the South. So it's nothing great about that movement. Like Cynthia said, it was basically domestic terrorism. So now, was it a bad thing, so to speak, leaving? It created a whole lot of black ingenuity. The mixture and the infusion of black people created a lot of great culture, a lot of great art in these regions. But I'm gonna end with saying this. What Mr. Blow said in one of the latter parts of the book is that the benefits of the Great Migration basically has ceased in yielding its benefits. You know, and he literally said that towards the end of the book, that it's not giving out any dividends anymore. So what he's calling for, and I'm gonna say what we are calling for, to establish political power to save the nation, because that's what this is all about. It's about other things, but it's also about this to save the nation, that we need what? Like 22% of black people to remigrate, the descendants of those who migrated. We need them to remigrate back to key sections of the South. And we'll get into that doing these shows.
Indeed, indeed. I want to bring up something from page 4. I just want to have a brief discussion on this. Me and Josh would talk. I think we was talking about this either earlier or yesterday. But I want to read this excerpt from page 4, where he's basically talking about performative activism. So let me read this. He says, but in the binding, as is always the case, the precise, particular grievance of Black America is ever in danger of subsumption. The Black battle is not necessarily joined, but hijacked, overwhelmed by the white liberal grievance. Now, I mean, he has some more that, you know, what he's talking about. All right, look, let me read the rest of this quote. Ed Mondane, or E.D. Mondane, I may be pronouncing that wrong. There's an accent on the E. President of the Portland, Oregon branch of the NAACP, wrote an opinion piece about the protest in the city for the Washington Post under the headline, Portland's protests were supposed to be about Black lives. Now they're white spectacle. In it, he questioned, vandalizing government buildings and hurling projectiles at law enforcement draw attention, but how do these actions stop police from killing Black people? You know, he's going on about Antifa, leftists, and basically doing this because of murdered Black bodies, right? And at the end, he says, is it fair to ask, are they really furthering the cause of justice, or is this another example of white co-optation? He said, end quote. Charles Blow goes on to say, and in the end, however, protest is performed, for what motivations? It will eventually wane. Outrage is an expensive emotion. It consumes energy like a blaze. At some point, inevitably, the fuel is exhausted. In the afterglow of it all, in the ash what have we truly gained from this episode besides displays of performative activism by organizations and allies, people cosplaying Black allegiance, and legislative tokenism that assuages white guilt and attempts to coax Black people into passivity, into quietly absorbing an endless oppression? So I thought, and Josh, let me know, what your thoughts on this is. When I read this, I instantly thought of performative activism, like what's going on with Tamika Mallory and the Cadillac commercials being called out by Samir Rice. And, these activists are basically making money off of using the names of dead Black bodies. I thought that should be a mention in this particular piece. When it seems like he kind of puts it all on white liberalism. And when I was reading it, I couldn't help but to think of all of the other aspects of people that use our struggle to advance their own causes. It's not just the white liberal. If we break them down into groups, right? It's the LGBTQ group, it's the Asian groups, it's the Hispanic groups. All of these different groups use the Black struggle, the Black grievance to create their own push for legislation, right? So, okay, the LGBT community got a bill passed through the House last year. What else? You got Asian Americans under AAPI trying to get $300 million from Biden. I mean, they already, I believe, have a bill that's about to get signed by Biden on anti-Asian hate, while there's nothing signed on our behalf, right?
They got the Office of New Americans popping up.
Office of New Americans.
They trying to make an Office of New Americans, pretty much, I guess they're trying to make it an administration in the executive branch.
Well, go ahead. Go into it, Josh. Go into what I was reading and break that down.
When we were talking the other day, I was thinking that, a lot of these are branches of white liberalism, because you can see like they're the main ones behind pushing all of or many of these other avenues, or there's a widespread support for these other avenues. And I'm trying to understand, we see a whole lot of support for all of these other programs and all of these other, I don't even know what you want to call them, but everything except for doing what we need done, and what we're doing, things that pertain to what we're owed. You know what I mean? Like it was an interesting conversation on Clubhouse today. But I'm not going to get into it, because what we talked about, a lot of it was, private. But I would just say, this Office of New Americans that's popping up all around the country, and it's almost like I want to say, I was told today in Chicago, they have an office. There was an office of. They have office of all these other type of groups that like some of the brother Naheem just mentioned, right? And what the Office of New Americans is doing, not only in Chicago and Illinois, is consolidating those together and having funds and contracts and set asides and stuff just for this conglomerate of groups, right? And I'm like, if you look at our numbers in America today, like just look, we talk about our story all the time, descended from chattel slavery, being emancipated to homelessness after the Reconstruction is overthrown, and the Freedmen Acts is thrown to hell, and they renege on 40 acres and a mule and all that kind of stuff. We get put into the black codes and all this type of stuff, convict leasing and peonage and all this kind of stuff, right? And then we go through generation. Every generation is a new form of essentially re-enslavement, right? One form or another. Now, in this generation, we see it's mass incarceration. And I think the next way forward is just complete erasure. And you just be. I don't know. Is it going to be the nail in the coffin? And I'm like, if these groups can get treated like they can get funds, they can get set aside, they can get all these things, but 50% of the homeless population in America with children are Black, and I would venture to say probably 95, I don't know, 95% of those are probably descendants of Freedmen, 40%, we're 40% of the total homeless population, 50% of the homeless with families. But we don't have any set asides to make sure we can get employment, make sure we can get contracts, and make sure we can get training, and make sure social programs to help us and all this kind of stuff. Like, it needs to be an office or a bureau of Freedmen Affairs that's
right.
put in place. And, just like we talked about it last night, just like we got the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and you go and look at all of the programs listed on that website. You go and look at the Office of New Americans, you see all the programs that's being proposed, and some of them is being implemented. We need all of that and more, right? Like, we go on the Bureau of Indian Affairs site, and you see stuff like relocation. Yeah, we need relocation. Like, even I just want to say this too. Like, when you look at the plan that's proposed, the reparations plan proposed by Narcan and Cobra, and you see things like repatriation on that. Yeah, I'm down for repatriation, but guess what? Not to no Ghana or some Igbo land or Wolof land. We need to have repatriation to give our people the right to move back to the South, where we can get political power, where we can take advantage of working together and all these type of things.
Indeed. So, Brother Grimm, let's pull out some of your notes. Let's get into some of the things that you thought were powerful, and I'll get back into some of mine as well. Look, family, we might spread this out over 2 nights. So let me make an announcement. We have the author of the book, Charles Blow, coming on next week, next Thursday, 11 a.m. to be interviewed. So make sure y'all are up for that one. Y'all already know that is going to be a powerful piece. But tomorrow night, we want to get into this conversation a little bit deeper. And we want to bring some of you on who have read the book to share some of your thoughts as well. So, don't forget. Also, do not forget, June 18th in Atlanta, the descendants of Freedmen, us, the descendants of the Freedmen here in America, will be having a reparations rally in Atlanta, Georgia, at the state capitol. I mean, look, it's time for some action. You know how that Red Man song go? Time for some action, right? And in the South, let me say this, right? Before you go in, Grim, the South has a certain swagger. The North, every place in America has a certain swagger. But here on the East Coast specifically, we could see how that swag has merged. And Atlanta, to me, has always been an example of North meets South, right? Because I would see somebody from Atlanta back in the days, I'd be like, all right, these dudes dress fly like we dress, but they just got they Southern slang, et cetera, with it. And we need that now politically. We need that moving forward. We need that combination. If you think about Charles Blow, if you think about his book, this book that we're getting into, he is a representative of that, but more so from a higher class life. And this is something that he breaks down in the book. We come from out, if you from the South, you come from out the mud. If you from New York City, you come from out the concrete, right? But we need that mixture right now more than ever so that we can start the process of implementing this plan. In essence, we need each other, the North and the South. There can be no more battles between Northern. I remember when we were debating the people at ADOS, and it was one of the brothers and the sisters said, "Oh, so y'all Northerners think y'all gonna set us Southerners straight? We dumb to y'all," or something like that. Then one of the guys started calling us carpetbaggers. That's something that the racist Southerners of the South called the white Northerners. And now you picked up this language and started calling us by it? Like, what? We have to end that. We have to end that. There's a power that comes from both cultures that we need to blend at every level, not just at the high class political journalistic level, but at the collegiate and professional levels as well, and also at the street level. You see a lot of high school or college ball players that are on teams in the South that come from the North, right? Equally, you'll see, let's go to the NFL. You'll see somebody on the New York Giants that come from the South. Lawrence Taylor, I think he was from the South, right? One of the greatest New York Giants of all time. We need those things to make our tribe, the descendants of freedmen here in America, stronger. So I just wanted to throw that in there. So Brother Grimm, go in. We got our brother Ali on deck, another New York City native. Go in, Grimm. We're going to pick out some your experts, touch on them. We'll get some commentary from Brother Ali, and then I'll go back into some things that I picked out, and then Josh, you will go in. Go ahead, Brother Grimm.
Yeah, and I just want to add to what you said as well, because like this book is about lived experience, and we talked about that earlier. And technically, there is already a trickle south of a lot of our people, but just not in the significant numbers like Charles Blow pointed out, that we need to make political change. Because even in this post hurricane environment that I live in, there is a lot of people who are descendants of freedmen, some of them not descendants of freedmen, some of them are Black immigrants that have come into my particular area, right? Talking about lived experience. And they brought those, and they are bringing those things that you talked about, basically merging those flavors, merging those cultures, bringing new, fresh ideas. They got Black people down here that opened up juice bars and opening up vegan and vegetarian restaurants, when that's technically not a thing that Black Louisianians do. We'll open up something and serve you a sack of crawfish or something like that. Go sit out on the lake and eat some crawfish with some smoked sausage and corn boiled with the crawfish. We'll do that. You know what I'm saying? But you don't see no Black people opening up no chill, jazzy juice bar spots. See, that's some kind of northern flavor, West Coast flavor, basically being infused into the culture from people coming in both areas. And then they are adapting things from us as well, like the crawfish and the food and and the things of that nature, the culinary culture of Louisiana. They adopting that as well, the Creoleness or whatever. So, with that being said, man, Charles Blow pointed these things out, that this should take place and that it'll bring a new, fresh excitement. Yakami. So we'll do some eat some Yakima at a second line or something like that. But man, we ain't opening no vegan spots but that's something that comes from y'all region, Naheem. And with that being said, just so I want to point out something too. And Charles Blow made this book so simple to understand the strategy, right? And you want me to just go into the chapter, or you just wanted me to point out something that just stuck out to me? Because
well, yeah, I mean, do what you want to do with it, bro.
So basically, what the page is this? Because Josh said this, share the page. Basically, on page 31, he says it right out, and I want to read it so everybody can get into the understanding of what we talking about. So on page 31, which is the first page of chapter 2, the proposition, right? He said the proposition is simple. As many Black descendants of the Great Migration as possible should return to the South from which their ancestors fled. And they should do so with moral and political intentionality. And as many Black people, not descendants of American slavery as possible, should join in their resettlement. You follow what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, this is about the moral and the political intentionality, as he said. It's not just about merging cultures, right? But it's about gaining seats in Congress. And y'all correct me if I'm wrong. This is about gaining seats so we can have the votes possible. And he goes into the switching of the party. That something like this would be so revolutionary that it probably would change the whole stance of both the Democratic and the Republican Party. And the Republican Party itself, as Mr. Blow put out in the book, the Republican Party would have to basically adopt certain things because there would be a change in political power. And it's not like this hasn't happened before. It has already happened to where Black people basically, for lack of a better word on my part, defected from the Republican Party and joined the Democratic Party, which was basically the party of the terrorists at the time, and the party of the people who are trying to deny our rights. And basically, Black people's vote, he points out, have been used and weaponized by white people against other white people. So I'm saying, why not take our vote and use it for ourselves? And it's not about destroying anybody else's way of life or subjugating white people and keeping them out of the process. It's not about that. You follow what I'm saying? It's about the fact that we know that we go have, he used the word moral, basically the moral authority to set this thing right. Now, and I'm going into my part that I wanted to touch on real quick from the book, y'all. I want to go way to the back of the book, which is chapter 6, which was really the most touching part of the book for me. Because basically Charles Blow is saying that we have to create nurturing, loving, and safe spaces for Black people. Because even in the North and in the West and all of those different places, you know, he made an example that the creativity of a lot of our professional class is basically being stifled, so to speak, because we have to live these existences of basically always justifying our worth and existence. Y'all follow what I'm saying? So we always got to prove that we not the angry Black man or angry Black woman. We basically have to prove that we are not stupid. We basically have to prove that we are not ignorant. So it's a preoccupation. And people in the professional world should know what I'm talking about. It's basically a preoccupation with Black people who are constantly proving their worth. So he was saying if we do this too, in addition to the political power, we can create a whole new world experience in this country for our people, thereby creating these safe spaces, right? So let me go to some things that I want to read that basically touched me in regard to the book. This is page 199 in chapter 6, which is the reunion. Among America's descendants of slavery, there isn't one Black America, but two. The children of the Great Migration and the children of those who stayed behind in the South. I am a child of those who stayed, but I have had the great fortune to live half my life in the South and half the other half out of it. The experience has informed my view that it is time to reunite and reconcile those two factions. We started the show talking about that, reconciling the two factions. The energetic enlightenment of the urban North and West with the patient, purposeful pragmatism of the South. Because the amalgamation somewhere in the middle, where the best of both males, is where our greatest strengths lives and can be manifest. The Black narrative in America, constructed by America, is one of slavery, oppression, despair, and deprivation, survival and overcoming. Anti-Black white supremacy is so omnipresent in the Black American story that it puts far out of reach what white America has been allowed to enjoy, the construction of a narrative of heroism. I don't know if y'all know how deep what I'm reading is. Of heroism, adventure, dominance, and invincibility. So the brother is saying that if we get together in these regions, as he called them, making this thing regional, we can create the whole new dynamic of education system, sitting on school boards, rewriting textbooks, them seeing positive Black women and positive Black men in a society where they don't have to feel uncomfortable by living among others. He put this together real beautifully, man. And I'm gonna go to page 206, 202. He said, we need space. Listen, talk about Black people. We need space to reverse the absorption of white anxiety. Because we all have experienced white anxiety. And even the white people, they might not even talk about it or mention it, but they know that we live with white anxiety. You follow what I'm saying? Not just the fact of being afraid of a police pulling up behind you, even though that you know you got license, insurance, registration, and everything else, right? But we live in anxiety professionally and in our social interactions with them as well, because of the psychological effects that has happened to us during slavery and post-Reconstruction, right? So we need space to reverse the absorption of white anxiety into our flesh, their fear of us, contempt of us, and disdain of us. Black people in America have suffered so much oppression, and deprivation that people, including many Black people, have falsely come to regard the resulting ill effects as a product of culture rather than infliction of culture. So I can go on and on about this particular chapter, but basically the brother
that was my background. That was just a powerful bar right there, man. That was powerful. That was powerful. Yeah, go ahead, and I'll touch on it after you finish. Go ahead, bro.
Indeed, brother. And basically, this chapter is talking about the social aspect of doing this thing, that, you know, we will create basically, you know, safe spaces within ourselves. And I know Lionel are basically understand this is what I'm about to read right here. And this will be one of the last paragraphs that I read. He said, in the South, Black culture is primary. It is expressed.
What page you coming from, bro?
I'm sorry, this is page 207. The previous page was that I read from, I believe, was 202 and page 199. In the South, Black culture is primary. It is expressed in powerful Black churches and impressive Black colleges, which, according to a Newsweek report citing the United Negro College Fund data, produce 70% of all Black dentists and doctors, 50% of Black engineers and public school teachers, and 35% of Black lawyers. Black culture is in the jazz and the blues that were in the South, and in the Black social welfare organizations, the Black fellowship organizations that thrive there. You know, things like the social aid and pleasure clubs, Second Line, the Elks, the Masons, the Shriners, so on and so forth, Order of the Eastern Star, the Black Greek letter societies, right? It is in the nation's largest Black cultural festival, the Essence Festival. They made a whole movie about the Essence Festival with Queen Latifah and all of those sisters. I can't think of their names right now. I can't remember the whole name of the movie. But it goes on to say, in the nation's largest Black cultural festival, the Essence Festival, and the nation's largest Black sporting event, the Bayou Classic, both of which take place in New Orleans. It is in Southern food, which the food historian Michael Twitty points out is really the food of the enslaved, brought with them from the homeland and cooked by them here in America. The South is the origin point of Black culture in America. It is impossible to be a proud Black person in America and to be ashamed of the South. Because I know that there is people who basically listening to us right now, and that's all they can think about is fricassee coon or a raccoon or whatever, you know, and they thinking about racial oppression and things of that nature when we experiencing that stuff all around. But the South is now beginning to present us with a new dynamic, whereas Charles Blow is pointing out that a lot of the stuff that's happening in the North has always been happening, but it's been covert, you know? So let me go on to finish this up. So to consider Southern Black culture inferior, it is impossible to be proud to be a proud Black person in America and to be ashamed of the South, to be adverse to the South, to consider Southern Black culture inferior and wanting. Southern heritage is intertwined with the very concept of American Blackness. As R.C. Davis put it in 1961, play Pearly Victorious, about a Black preacher who returns to the Jim Crow era Georgia to fight to save a church, liberate Black people from the cotton field, and collect family restitution from a plantation owner. Say, I find in being Black a thing of beauty, a joy, a strength, secret cup of gladness, a native land in neither time nor place, a native land in every Negro face. Be loyal to yourselves, your skin, your hair, your lips, your Southern speech, your laughing kindness are Negro kingdoms, vast as any other, except in full sweetness your Blackness, not wishing to be red, nor white, nor yellow, nor any other race or face but this. So basically, don't be ashamed of the Southernness. Exalt it. Exalt what Maya Angelou called the sweet language, adopted from a West African phrase, the way Black people sing the ends of sentences to connotate endearment. I mean, I can go on and on and on, but this is the last thing I promise. The Great Migration, he began to say, I'm reading on 209 now. Well, I'm going to start at 208. I am imploring Black people to be loyal to ourselves, to understand that we have in front of us an opportunity for self-determination. So this Southern move strategy is basically the epitome of self-determination, of which our ancestors only dreamed, and about which white America has dreaded. That's what that damn thing was, January 6th. They dread this happening. This era's Hajj is the pull of Black people back to the piney hills of the Carolinas, Georgia, and Alabama, to the lowlands of Mississippi and the bayous of Louisiana. The Great Migration was an extraordinary social experiment, a somewhat organic galvanizing of collective conscience that produced collective action. It has unlocked opportunity and unleashed creativity for multiple generations of Black Americans. Now listen to this. Its initial benefits have long since reached a point of diminishing returns. However, the success of the Great Migration now stands shoulder to shoulder with the suffering that grew out of it. But there is a way to alter this reality. The only thing Black people have to do is come home. The South now beckons as the North once did. The promises of real power is made manifest. Seize it, migrate, move.
Oh yeah. I mean, this book is powerful, family. This is a powerful, powerful read. And I thought him using the word Hajj was well placed, right? Because up in the North, you're going to find Islam. I was born a 5%er. I was born around 5%ers in New York City. The 5%ers came out of the Nation of Islam, which has its roots in Detroit and in Chicago, which came out of the Moorish Science Temple of America, which has its roots in Chicago and had its greatest temple in Detroit, right? So that the placing of that word there, you know, I often speak about, and Josh, I want you to come in after this. I just want to give a little breakdown. What King mentions this in his seminal works, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? He said, if we would but use that old Hegelian dialectic, much of our problems would be solved. And I have even said on this platform before that there was always this type of battle, right? There was always this dichotomy of thought when it came to our people that was never properly merged together so that we could create this lasting thing. And that was manifest in the beef that Dr. King and Malcolm X had. Now, that wasn't Dr. King's beef necessarily. That was Malcolm X's beef that he, carrying on from the instructions of Elijah Muhammad, chose to take up. Because if you think about it, those that know the history of when Dr. King goes to Chicago, he's met not with just the resistance of Mayor Daley and those people of Chicago, the white people of Chicago, where he said, and I quote, I paraphrase, that if the people from the South really want to learn how to hate, they should move to Chicago. And he wasn't talking about the GDs, the BDs, and the vice lords. He was talking about them white people up there. That's who King was talking about. But he was faced with opposition from Black leaders out there. His opposition also came from the Nation of Islam up there. And a lot of people don't know that. And this is a perfect time for us to start using that Hegelian dialectic. It's the perfect time for us to find out what our strengths are and label that as our thesis, to find out the things that maybe our weaknesses, the things that could hurt both of us collectively. And we will stamp that as the antithesis and then synthesize all of the good things that we were able to draw out of with our thesis. This is what we need to do with the North and the South. And when we say North, let us not strictly put that on New York City or Detroit or Chicago. We also mean the Midwest. We also mean California. In California right now, there's, if my memory serves me correctly, there's about 5 million Hispanics in Los Angeles and 800,000 Black Americans. How is it that the people, the day one citizens over there, represents one of the lowest populations of people over there? Our people are not only being terrorized by LAPD in that city and many cities like that in California, but they're also being terrorized by Hispanic gangs, houses firebombed. This Southern strategy, this what we're reading right now, needs to make its way over to the West Coast. And you know, we're gonna have the author on next week, 11 a.m. Thursday. And you know, maybe that'll be something that we can ask about, touring the country and having this conversation. And I know that I'm going to always bring up this conversation, this Southern strategy. I'm going to make it a conversation, I should say. I'm going to always bring up this topic so that it can become a conversational piece. When I start traveling back around the states, hopefully this COVID thing starts dying down. The news is showing that there's an uptick in several states because people are not being patient, but that's another program. So, brother Josh, what did you pick out of the book? Let's get into that and you know, get into your portion of it and let's build on it.
Yeah. Well, first I wanted to talk about, I like how he really broke it down in terms of push and pull factors. Like when he wants to talk about how we were pushed out, what factors served as the push to push us out of the South into, and then what were the factors that were pulling us to these destination cities. So I'm gonna go and read from page 113. And I just want to show, I want to talk about like.
But before you go, Josh, P. Burley, I see your question. If you all can save your questions towards the end of tonight's live stream. Also, we're going to do a part 2 tomorrow night because we want to invite those on who have read the book to come share their experiences as well. Yeah, go ahead, Brother Josh.
Okay. I want to talk about something because, you know, the push factor, that there was a lot. I'm going to read something and I want Brother Ali to come in and maybe give like a personal, family story or, whatever he wants to share on that end. So it was saying here, this is page 114. It says, when you zero in on some of the destination cities, the picture gets even worse. Hold on, let me go back further. It says, the data revealed that the black incarceration rate in Pennsylvania and California is higher than Louisiana. The black incarceration rates in Michigan, Missouri, and Illinois are higher than Alabama. And the black incarceration rates in Connecticut and New Jersey are higher than Georgia and Mississippi. When you zero in on some of the destination cities, the picture gets even worse. Just 5% of the people in San Francisco are black, but black people account for 56% of the people in the city's prisons. As San Francisco public defender Chesa Boudin has pointed out, quote, the reality is that San Francisco incarcerates African Americans at a rate of more than 1,700 per 100,000 residents. For context, that's 3 times the incarceration rate of Russians at the height of the Gulag. It's the highest incarceration rate of African Americans per capita of any major city in the country. And then it skips over to, it says, I'm going to read it. It says, the great American mythos holds that racism is a sectoral rather than omnipresent, pervasive. Racism is sectoral rather than omnipresent, pervasive, and suffused. In truth, there is no promised land of egalitarian actualization, no regional respite from racism. Black people in America must engineer their own Zion. They must carve it out in the hide. They must carve it out of the hide of the country. And yet, check this out, right? And yet, in the decades preceding the Great Migration, not even racial oppression and racial terror were enough to dislodge Black people from the South. So first he was talking about over here, the factors that we're dealing with outside of the South. Those are large reasons. Those are the push factors of today, that are driving some of our people, but obviously not the masses. And there are reasons where we should be looking to leave some of these other places. But it says, no matter how much they suffered, the vast majority still stayed. They needed a nudge, a shock to the economic system to jolt them out of migratory stasis and into action. That shock came with the boll weevil infestation in cotton states beginning around the turn of the 20th century. The combined forces of economic crisis and social justice crisis finally set the migration into motion. And I'm going to skip over to page 115. And it says here, Black people moved north and west during the Great Migration as a result of the combination of a push and a pull. The push was the racial terror and racial oppression of the Jim Crow South. The pull was the hope of a better life, economic and social and political. I say the same sense of terror and oppression that pushed people out of the South has been reincarnated in the North and the West. Hyper-militaristic policing, predatory incarceration, and the rebirth of a hate group movement are rendering destination cities unwelcoming, inhospitable, and in some cases, uninhabitable. Among Black people in these destination cities, there had long been and still exists a fetish. Matter of fact, I'm not going to get into that. That's a whole different thing. What I want to do is, just to give an example of some of the of what we were fleeing from and what we were escaping in the South. Brother Ali, did you want to speak to some of that? And maybe talk to, because a lot of times, like Brother Naheem and Brother Ali have a unique experience in separate from me and Grim, being that their families were families who actually did come to the North for various reasons. So I just wanted to see if you wouldn't mind sharing your family story, Ali.
If you're
Okay.
trying to speak, Ali, you're muted.
Oh, okay. Maybe not. All right.
He probably couldn't get through. He probably
hop back on.
Let me say before you go, Josh. It's so funny that I could see we highlighted a lot of the same points. I was listening to some of what Grim was reading, and then some of what you were reading, and I'm like, okay, these are exact quotes that I have highlighted as well. So yeah. So Brother Ali, I don't know if you were able to hear Josh, but he wanted you to give your personal account of your family who were from the South and why they migrated north. What happened?
Well, one of the things that he touches on in the book, obviously, and it was mentioned, was terrorism, right? Racial terrorism. And I know I've mentioned it on the show, on one of the episodes before, the story about how my mother's side of the family came to the North from the South, and it had everything to do with racial terrorism. So brief breakdown. I'm gonna tell the story again. For those who already heard it, just bear with me. My aunt, her name was Maggie, right? My aunt Maggie. She was the oldest of 8 children that my grandfather Horace and my grandma Cora had. My aunt Maggie, while they were living in the South, they were working in my grandmother, my grandfather, and not all 8 of the kids, because all 8 of them weren't all born down there. I don't think. I think the youngest 2 might have been born further up. But in any case, they were in Florida at the time. They lived in Belle Glade, Florida, which is a part of the Everglades. And they were working in some field doing, I'm not sure exactly what they were doing. I don't think it was picking cotton. It was something else. I think they were doing beans. They were picking beans, is what she said. They were picking beans. And so anyway, my Aunt Maggie witnessed a group of white men murder a black man. I don't know what the reason was or whatever, but they murdered the black man, and she actually witnessed it. The problem was they saw her witnessing them doing it. So one day they were working in the bean field, and these white men came in a pickup truck, and they attempted to run my Aunt Maggie over in the bean field. They were trying to run her down. She was running from the truck, from what my mother was telling me. She was running from the truck. And so my grandfather ran out into the field and scooped her up. And where the field was at, it was located near a wooded area, like some woods. My grandfather grabbed my aunt, ran with her into the woods, and they hid in the woods, I think, overnight until those people stopped looking for them. The next morning, they came home. They packed up the car, everything that they could fit in the car with all of the kids, and they left Florida. They called them Klansmen. Whether they were Klansmen or not, I don't know if they were actually Klansmen, but they said they were Klansmen. And so from there, they moved to Georgia first. They worked in Georgia for a little while, left Georgia, moved to South Carolina, worked in South Carolina for a little while, left there, moved to North Carolina. So basically, they moved all the way up until they got into New York, Auburn, New York. They moved to Auburn, New York, and where my grandfather ultimately got sick and passed away. He died in Auburn, New York. And from there, they moved to New York City, where they were living in Brooklyn first with my Uncle Jake, who was my grandma Cora's older brother. So they were living with Uncle Jake for a while in Brooklyn. And then my grandma Cora got her own place over in Harlem on Lenox Avenue, 111th Street. And so they were living there. And from there, my mom and dad met. I think they met in church or something. Yeah, they did meet in church. My mother was singing in a choir, not a choir, it was a group called the Six Wings. There's a group called the Six Wings. She was singing. And my father was working with a group called the Swan Silvertones or something like that, because he was a guitarist. So he played in the church, and my mother sang in the church, and that's what he met. He met in the church, singing and playing and whatever. And they got married and got their apartment ultimately in the Manhattanville projects, where they had me and Riri and my brother Khalid. You know what I'm saying? And that's where we were raised, born and raised in Manhattanville projects. But basically, from my mother's side of the family, they were running from, the white terrorism that was occurring, or that they witnessed down in Florida. So that's in a nutshell, that's what happened and how my mother's family and my mother wound up in New York City.
Indeed. You muted, Josh.
I want to ask you and Naheem a question. I'm gonna start with you, Ali. Probably because so Ali, would you say that you saw like maybe a difference or a degradation in the projects, or maybe your mother or your father had accounts to talk about the degradation of the projects over the course from, like, let's say maybe their youth or during your youth, were you able to see any of that to where the projects is like went all the way down, you know?
Oh yeah. Yeah, because when they first moved into Manhattanville projects, there were a lot of white folks in there. Now, what does that mean? Well, when white folks live somewhere, people take care of stuff. You know what I'm saying? It's considered, you know, a nice place to be, a safe place to live. But along with black migration came white flight. And so the projects, believe it or not, were actually built for white people, particularly white women. A lot of people don't know that, you know, and so there were a lot of them there, right? And when my parents moved there were a lot of white people there from what they told us. And as blacks began to move in, they moved out to the suburbs, you know, was able to purchase homes, all of that kind of stuff. And when that happened, the quality of the projects, the maintenance, the upkeep of the grounds, all of that stuff, everything went down. Everything went down. So they definitely witnessed it and have spoken on it over the years. And I saw it from when I was a little boy, you know, up until the time that we left. The time that I left the projects, I was 21 years old. So I was there for 21 years. And so during that time, yeah, I saw things change. Definitely saw things change.
Yeah, man, I think I can say the same thing growing up in the housing project. I was born in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, right? Let me just get into this a little bit. Both of my parents come from South Carolina. My father was born in Brooklyn. My mother was born in South Carolina. They, unlike Ali's parents, they didn't meet at the church. They met at one of the gang rallies that they used to have in Brooklyn. Anybody familiar with the movie The Education of Sonny Carson knows the gang rallies and what I'm talking about, particularly in Brooklyn. And my father was a part of a gang called the Hellcats, and my mother was I believe she was the leader of the female outlaws under the legend Sonny Carson himself, the man who they made the movie about. I think my father told me there was some type of politics going on, so my father boycotted the movie. And because he wasn't going to be in the movie, he told my mother she couldn't be in the movie. So I'm a product of that union, right? My father turns a 5%er, and you know, like most of them in Brooklyn, they start to come out of that gang life. Many of them just brought a lot of that stuff with them into the 5%ers, to be honest with you. But from Brooklyn, about 5-6 years old, I moved to Far Rockaway, Queens, and that place is people think Brooklyn is crazy. Far Rockaway is crazy, right? But I was raised.
My man T. Wills. My man T. Wills got hit over there in Far Rockaway, man. Lost a leg.
Crazy.
Lost a leg, man. Just some I don't know if it was random. The dude ran up on him, shot him, shot my boy Omar. My man Wills got shot in the leg, but he wound up losing that leg, man. Out there in Far Rockaway.
Yeah, that's where I was. I was raised at. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending. I think I came out all right. I was able to mix a little bit of my street and my intellectualism into one type of incredible Hawk-like character that you see in the Avengers Endgame movie. But anyway, I watched the projects go. This was let me share it from a different perspective.
Hey, if it gets loud on my end, just mute me, okay? Because we're in the kitchen.
All right. I go from I'm gonna go from this perspective. I watched a community in the housing projects. We shared things. Ghostface tells it in the joint he did with Mary J. Blige. Like, we would knock on the neighbor's door for stuff. It was a real community setting in the housing projects. I watched as they broke up that thing that made us a community. And eventually the gangs from the West Coast started to come into New York City. And the next thing you know, you had Bloods and Crips. But the thing about New York City was that it was a beacon of consciousness. You had 5%ers, Nation of Islam, Hebrew Israelites, atheists. You had church folks that wasn't like your traditional type of church folk, but they were more into the Black nationalist church. You had Pan-Africanism. You had a melting pot of intellectuals and pseudo-intellectuals, right? I know because I brought a lot of them books off the streets of Brooklyn and Manhattan that when I think about them now, I'll be like, man, that book was garbage. Right? That information was trash. But that made up the New York experience. So I tell a story all the time where I would be on a train in New York City, and you got to be on point. You can't doze off on a train. You can't and every time that car door open, you got to look to make I'm older now. How the kids say it today? Make sure the ops are not getting on the train, right? And you got to be on point. And but at one point I would notice that everybody, like dudes that would look like me, that'd be sitting there with the ice grills and all that. After a while, everybody would pull out their books. So I started to see that even with a lot of the street cats, they were reading, they were constantly learning. This was happening every single time. And then the next thing you know, we had the Bloods coming to New York City, and then the Crips. Now you got the Chicago gang life that is a part of New York City as well. And because they never fixed the problem, right? I'm just going somewhere else with it, because they never fixed the problem in the New York City housing when it came to the people. What they did was they would get monies allocated in the budget, maybe from the federal government and from the state, for urban revitalization. So what they did was, I'm not a Christian, but I'm very familiar with the Bible. There's a passage in, I think, Matthew 23, where Jesus speaks about the whitewashed tombs and how they look so pretty on the outside, but on the inside, they're full with rotting corpses. And this was the housing projects. And really, this was the ghettos of America. But the housing projects in New York City didn't necessarily look like the rest of the ghettos from America. If you were just driving by a housing project in New York City, you might say, oh, it looks nice. You got some bushes and all of those things. You don't know what's going on inside the buildings and on the grounds of the housing projects, especially when the lights turn off. So there was never an investment made into the people, just making it look good on the outside. There's so many different places that I can go, but I want to get everybody else a chance to come in, and I want to get into some more of the book before we get off of here. So, did you have anything else you wanted to ask in that regard?
Well, yeah. Well, I just want to talk about New York, but I'm gonna bring it from the book. And it was saying, this is page 98, and it says part of what's radicalizing young white men in destination cities and states, it seems to me, is a backlash against a decade of being chastised into checking their privilege and feigning shame or contrition over their historically oppressive identity. This is a backlash against the backlash, privilege rearing to battle anti-privilege. New York City and other destination cities have, in effect, engaged in their own backlash, this one in the form of public policy ethnic cleansing a sort of eradication by economic bullying and a removal of less desirable citizens for more desirable ones. Washington, D.C. was sued in 2008 for $1 billion over gentrification and what the complaint called a 12-year policy to attract the creative class, quote unquote. The complaint charged that the city's agenda desperately impacts other protected classes such as race, family, religion, and matriculation. It went on to detail that some Black residents are highly offended by current plans that are underway to actively integrate their neighborhoods, as if something is wrong with African Americans living together in tight-knit communities. In 2015, DC lost its designation as a majority Black city after being majority Black for decades. In 1970, the city was more than 70% Black. As one Black resident told the Washington Post, DC was called Chocolate City. Now it's called Chocolate Chip City. That's funny because y'all know I always make that comparison. And when I was speaking at the Reparations March on Valentine's Day this year in DC, I said DC used to be chocolate. It used to be Chocolate City. Now it's like Latte City or something, right? So it says cities like the swap. Younger, wealthier, educated white people are likely to use fewer services and add more to the tax base in place of poorer people who use more services and earn less. So they help facilitate by aiming more police pressure at young Black and brown men so that the young white gentrifiers feel safe. This may not be an articulated plan, but this is precisely how it functions. A pattern, dare I say, program of replacement through absorption and expulsion, in which young white people are wooed into gentrification and the young Black ones are terrorized into evacuation. Now, peep this is New York. In 2011, the Census Bureau released local data from New York that showed the first drop in the Black population of New York City on the census since at least 1880. As a point of reference, the Reconstruction era ended in 1877. The city's white, Asian, and Hispanic populations are all growing. There are multiple forces pushing Black people out of destination cities, including a hostile criminal justice system, gentrification, and rising cost of living. But I contend that they're all related. So, we have to, he goes into like the how NYPD did the stop and frisk, and he gives all kind of examples. He goes into the cash bail industry, the amount of stops that he goes all the way into all of that, right?
Let me say, Josh, what to cite, it's just like Dr. Darity's book that I suggest you all read if you haven't read it. If you haven't read From Here to Equality, right? It's one thing to cite statistics, just to cite them. It's another thing to cite them for a purpose. So in From Here to Equality, Dr. Darity is citing statistics to show why unequivocally only reparations could fix the descendants of freedmen in America, period. Only reparations, right? Blow expertly does the same exact thing for the purpose of what he's trying to relay in so far as his plan is concerned. And I just thought it was excellent. And I just wanted to add that because he really did his thing. He's making the case. Like not only are those populations growing in New York, the political power is also growing. Yeah, go ahead, bros. And then I'm gonna.
You mean their political power is also growing?
Their political power is growing. I just watched the video earlier today where the cops I think it was New York. They rolled up on this brother for nothing. Like, you just driving by staring at me. Now you mad because I ain't trying to drop my eyes or whatever. Now you trying to jump out on me and trying to harass me. And dude was cursing him out. He was 6'5", 300 pounds. So I guess they wasn't trying to have no part of that smoke, which is why I was like 20 of them. But I'm just saying. Yeah, go ahead, brother Josh.
No, I got some other stuff I wanted to get to. All
right, so let me.
But I want to go ahead.
Yeah, let me get into some of this. Then let's swing back to Grimm, and then we'll come back to you. I want to go to page 50. This was powerful to me. I mean, this was a powerful book. I didn't expect, like I said, when I first watched the interviews, I was like, Charles Blow? Like, this liberal, right, democratic shill. And he says that of himself. He says most people view him that way, which made this book, I was surprised. I was pleasantly surprised by it. Because when you're into politics and I've read several of Charles Blow's articles, right? We've watched several of his interviews over the years, and he sounds like the typical Democratic individual. Let's use that term, right? The typical Democratic, liberal, progressive
voice.
And voice, right? But I mean, he jumped out his body on this one, right? I just got it from what I know of him. And this is a powerful book. It just is. So let me read. This is from page 50, chapter 2, The Proposition. This is powerful. He says, the furious opposition will likely take many manifestations. There will likely be opposition from the Black elite class in destination cities, people whose power is based on their leadership and influence over a sizable Black population. There will also be opposition from the Black political class whose offices will be in jeopardy if the Black population in their cities shrink. This is almost like a push and pull factor, right? If you think about it. And in the one sense, the push this time is for us to reverse migrate. That's like, now it's time for us to get out the North. He cites many factors of why, many reasons of why we just need to get out of the North, basically, en masse, in my opinion. I'm from New York City. I've been living down here in Georgia for the past 13 years. I love it. I often think about going back to New York City. Y'all just heard me say before I start getting into this book that I'm about to move back to New York City and do politics. After reading this book, I have nixed that plan. I will not be going back to New York City. I'm going to stay here in the South. So let me finish reading. He says, this is a very real concern, which I want to address forthrightly. Again, he's talking about in the Black elite class in the destination cities, right? There's going to be some people who look at you a certain type of way because you're coming from up north. And this is one of those things that we got to break. This is why the great religious movements can help give us a blueprint on how to break these stigmas outside of the Black church, And I don't want to say it was mainly a Southern thing, because you had Black churches in the North as well. But in the North, you had a lot of Islam, and you had the Hebrew Israelites, you had all of these different groups, the Nuwapians under Dr. York, et cetera, et cetera. So it gave a different dynamic. Even when Dr. York moved down here to Eatonton, Georgia, in Athens, Georgia, and set up shop, there was a mixture of the North and the South that really hadn't happened before. You know, we can say what we want about Dr. York. He has been convicted for some things, right? But he is really the first one that kind of brings this experiment to light. If you X out all of the negative stuff, he brings this experiment to light, bringing people from the North down to the South and creating one community out of them. So now
that's real interesting, bro. I don't think we talked about that.
It just hit me. It just hit me, bro. As I'm talking. So let me read this page so we can get through it. All right. It says, this is a very real concern which I want to address forthrightly. There may be some fluctuation in Black political representation during the course of a reverse migration. And in the beginning, positions added in the South may not balance out those lost in destination cities and states. And he's absolutely right. This is not going to be no overnight thing. This is going to take some time. This is going to take settlement, familiarity, etc. He continues, this is a function of how political machines operate, the way regions are gerrymandered, the way parties horse trade, the way the establishment grooms ascendant stars, and the way voter suppression is inflicted. Now, he speaks about people migrating from the north into specific black cities. We were discussing this earlier. Brother Logic was on earlier on a call. He couldn't make it on tonight, family. But we had a discussion about that, right? And so my pushback to Blow saying that the people should focus on just Atlanta and whatever popular black cities are in the South was that in the South, when we're doing local politics, the way the state's racist state legislators are set up, their legislative bodies, due to the very thing he mentions here, gerrymandering, is designed in a way to bottleneck black voters into specific regions so that their power is not spread out over the state. It is akin to the electoral college nationwide. So I seen a tweet of Blow's about a week ago that said, if 700,000 blacks move from the north to Mississippi, we would basically be the numerical majority. I paraphrase. Now, I would want those 7,000 spread out all over the state. 3,000 here, 4,000 here, 2,000 there, so that we could start having representation in these gerrymandered places that are largely, or I should say predominantly, white areas. We got to start spreading this thing out. We are in a different time now. We know how to deal with these races. Ain't no running over us. Ain't no looking down at the concrete. We'll beat you up, dude. Point blank, period. I'm sorry, that's the projects coming out of me, y'all. But we need a little bit of that in the South. So let me see. He says, in the end, the benefit and abundance of black political power would be to the good. Even some white liberals who call themselves allies may shrink from the notion of black power, drawing a false equivalence to the concept of racial superiority espoused by the white power movement. And he touches on this as well, where he says this is not about segregation. This is not about black supremacy. This is about black power. Now, y'all know I don't like terms Negro, black, and color. So let me put that out there. These are racial classifications given by those people that label themselves white to essentially mentally weaken us. But we know that these are the familiar terms. So we speak in them. He says they recoil from the very mention of black power, even as they live out their lives in a world designed by and for white power. Not only the hooded and hailing, but also the robed and badged. Again, reference Martin Luther King Jr.'s book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? He speaks about this term white power. He gives his own Hegelian dialectic from chapter 1, chapter 2, and then on into chapter 3, where he shows the synthesis of what and how what he did work. Blow continues. Others may simply mourn the notion of a path to black equality that doesn't feature a starring role for the white liberal guilt, that doesn't center on their actions and their capacity for growth and evolution, but skips over it altogether. I thought that whole page, that whole page was just powerful, from him speaking about opposition from the people in cities where we would be leaving from, and from those into cities and states where we would be migrating to. And to this last part, others may simply mourn the notion of a path to black equality that doesn't feature a starring role for white liberal guilt, that doesn't center on their actions and their capacity for growth and evolution, but skips over it altogether. Often you hear me speak on this platform about what I dub white paternalism and the need to helicopter parent Black folk. They have to tell us what to do, right? They feel that they have to be involved. Even if it's not white guilt, then it's just pure white supremacy. They are the ones that they believe can tell us how we could spend reparation. And we're going to get into that too, but we might get into the reparations part tomorrow. I don't know. We'll see. But I want to come back to Grim, and then Josh is going to lay out the plan of blows for the reverse migration. Brother Grim.
Yeah, peace. Yeah. I don't want to step on Josh's toes because I was gonna basically
go ahead in, Grim.
All right, go in and we'll just touch on it.
Oh,
nah, man. What page? Let me ask this: what page were you coming from?
Me?
Yes, sir.
Nah, don't need. Go ahead. Just do your thing, bro. I know exactly how to piggyback off whatever you do. So go ahead.
Well, I won't be long then, man, because I would hate to do that. Basically, I want to go a little bit backwards in the book from where Naheem was reading from. He was reading on page 50. Mm-hmm. And, basically, I was coming from page 44. I don't know if that's what you was talking about, because I just want everybody to be clear about what Charles Blow is talking about and how easily practical this is as far as the reverse migration. I'm just going to say this. Basically, I'm going to give what he suggests, right? He suggests on page 44.
Wait, Grim, before you start, I got to say this because this occurred to me earlier on and I was laughing on the inside. I said, Grim is loving all this Louisiana talk in his book. He tired of hearing us New York and Chicago dudes always going back and forth, talk about New York this and Chicago that. So I know he loving all this Louisiana talk that's in this book because I'm on the page, so I see where you going with it. And then the first thing I have highlighted is the word Louisiana. So that I was laughing to myself earlier. Yeah, go ahead, bro. You muted. You muted, Grim.
You muted.
Well, I'm just like Cato is about South Carolina. Excuse me, y'all. He's proud of where he was where he's come from in South Carolina and his culture tied to the Gullah Geechee nation, right? So I kind of feel the same way about Louisiana because I believe that this is a magical place, man, and I've even though I live here and I'm kind of biased, I always believe that this place has a portion in the future of what happened to our race in this country, man. From profoundly spiritual levels, not just politics and economics and things of that nature. I believe that a lot of gravitation towards this area is basically driven by the fact of certain communities of people, namely transplant people of Caucasian descent, is basically to touch upon, the Black spiritual power that had been left here by our ancestors. And, Charles Blow touched on ancestors too. So, I don't know how much personally that he gets into ancestors, but in that chapter that I was reading from, chapter 6, he tied into the fact that the South was the land of our ancestors, and it was basically the closest place that our ancestors would ever get back to Africa would be in the places that we were deposited, you know, like, for example, the movie 12 Years a Slave. That plantation, or the spot where that plantation was, where that took place from, I used to walk past that place every day going to school.
Wow.
Going to school, from school, getting to the river to walk through the bywater to go home from school. I used to walk past the actual site of the 12 Years a Slave and never knew it. I used to walk past places where slaves were auctioned and like never knew it, you know. What else? You know, I used to ride my bicycle right where, you know, the case Plessy versus Ferguson, right?
Mm-hmm.
I used to walk past and ride my bike past the spot where Plessy versus Ferguson, where Plessy actually got on the train at. Never knew these things. And these people just started putting historical markers by these spots within the past 10 years or so, right? Maybe 15 years at the most. And yeah, now I'm with Corey too on what Corey, and yeah, I wouldn't sleep on that. But you know, I can only speak from my experience. You know, spiritually, I believe that this place has a profound connection to what's going on, because you know these were the places, Louisiana, when people was coming from the Caribbean. We're not talking about no immigrants, modern immigrants. We talking about pre-Civil War, right? A lot of the slaves would come in from the Caribbean ports and be held in Louisiana, specifically in New Orleans, and you know, basically sent to other parts of the country from that area. In fact, Louisiana was a failed project of the colonial powers, and they would take people from the prisons, right, and bring those people over here to make this colony work. But it all failed. It wasn't until they brought the exiled members of the African race over here to Louisiana, and they brought that infusion of those powerful cultures in this area, you know, not dismissing, because I love North Carolina, I love South Carolina, you know, but infusion of African slave people from the Sierra Leone area, people from the Mandé, the Mandinka, and stuff like that. You could drive through the French Quarter and actually look at the ironworks. And we talk about ironworks from the 1800s and see where these secret. They brought the Mandé people over here, the Mandingos over here, because they were master metallurgists, and they were able to work in iron. And they put like secret African symbols in the ironwork that exists in the French Quarters to this day. They built St. Augustine Church in Tremé. So I don't want to go off on a tangent on that, but I believe that, this particular area is spiritually important to the elevation of our people as a race, man. And, we talk about reparations and things of that nature, this grim talking. We talk about reparations and things of that nature, but I think that people should not dismiss the spiritual aspects by only dealing with the political and the economic aspects of our struggle. Because believe it or not, man, this thing is going to manifest itself on a spiritual level magically. And I'm not talking about pulling a rabbit out of a hat type magic, but and I know South Carolina is heavy on that too. And the thing about it is that the magic and the spirituality of our ancestor veneration, because Charles Blow mentions ancestor veneration, so to speak, in here, and honoring the ancestors as far as coming back to the homeland, which is the South. But I believe that the magic of our ancestors is going to take because I believe that what's going on with us as a people is profoundly tied into the spiritual and magical practices of our enemies, and not just legal and lawful ones. And I'll leave that right there. And that's why I believe, like the brothers are saying, North Carolina, South Carolina, and the things that go on there, and in particular, New Orleans is and Louisiana is integral to the spiritual elevation of our people, as far as the people from beyond, spiritually, is go basically, because we're gonna need help from the spiritual plane if we're gonna have to get any of this done, because we dealing with the nefarious enemy that is not unaware of their occult power in the universe. So I'm gonna leave it there. So, I was gonna I said enough, but I'm gonna let Josh go ahead and go on, man, with the that. But I was gonna come from 44. I'm gonna read that and then I'm gonna fall back. He says, in point of fact, my reverse migration argument targets only 9 of the states that are included in the census count: Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, that's what the brothers and sisters was talking about, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware. Specifically, I suggest gravitating to major cities arranged like jewels on a chain, which dot the Interstate 20, Interstate 95 corridor from Shreveport, Louisiana to Wilmington, Delaware. They include Jackson, Mississippi, Birmingham, Alabama, Atlanta, Georgia, Columbia, South Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina, about 90 miles north of I-20, Richmond, Virginia, Washington, D.C., preferably in the Maryland suburbs, because the district, unfortunately, is not a state and thus yield no senators, and Baltimore, Maryland. So you got it, Josh, bro. I just wanted to point that out.
I was muted. Yeah, man, that was powerful what you shared. Even talking about considering the spiritual aspects of this type of migration, because to me, like when we, especially like when we use terms like freedmen, it just brings about the thought of, like, it makes me like put myself in the mind or in the shoes of those ancestors who were coming out of that institution. It makes me think about like the generations they spent in Virginia and Georgia and Texas, North Carolina, Alabama, and to think that after so much of dealing with domestic terrorism and serious poverty, and because you think about like even stuff like the Great Depression, and where white folks were starving, what were the black folks dealing with, So yeah, it's something to think about dealing with the spiritual. But I want to come from page 28, and this is the beginning of chapter 2, the proposition. And it says, the proposition is simple: as many black descendants of the Great Migration as possible should return to the South from which their ancestors fled. They should do so with moral and political intentionality. As many black people not descendant of American slavery as possible should join in their resettlement. That's something we got to talk about. See, I know our talk is of reparations, and free and Bureau of Freedmen Affairs, because we need stuff. We need policies and programs that's going to be specifically targeted to repair this damage that was done through our whole experience in this land, right?
You see that? Real quick, Josh, you see that?
Hold up. Yeah, I
We was
know.
talking about that earlier. Yeah, good. My
Yeah, I
bad.
know.
I didn't mean to cut you. Go
Yeah.
ahead, bro.
No, I was saying, yeah, I know we from the South. I know we South. You know, but it's funny because people from VA, it's almost like we the north of the South. You know, so people like, you ain't. When you tell people where you from, they, you know, and then, well, I'm from Virginia. Oh, you ain't from the South, because they consider that deep. You know, when people say the South, they think about I mean, North Carolina, all right. South Carolina, yeah, definitely. Georgia, Alabama, you know, Mississippi, whatever. So, true. It was the capital of the Confederacy. Yeah. So, I mean, we was the leaders of the South. I ain't gonna say we. I ain't gonna even put we in that. I ain't gonna put we in that. But all right. This says, see this thing what I was talking about, where it says the descendants of slavery should move to the South, and people who are not descendants of slavery should join them. See, that's another thing we got to think about, because when we're talking about reparations, we're talking about specific policy for the freedmen and the descendants of freedmen, right? That's not something that we're talking about that is owed to people who are not descendants of slavery, right? Black folks are descended from slavery. We're not talking about that. But when we're talking about that, the point of doing that is to say, like, you weren't a damaged party, so therefore you're not owed, right? But that's not to say that, hey, we don't have like places where our circles and our interests align or intersect. That's not saying we don't share some things in common. Like, that's not meant to be a personal thing. So it's kind of like up to you to not side with white supremacy and to join us in ally. That shouldn't be a hard thing, you know. Like, before I really started going hard in the last few years with reparations, you know, I several years ago I visited Kenya, and I stayed over there for about 6 weeks, and you know, they let me know who I was. They let me know I was a Mzungu and I was American and whatever the case may be, Obama, right? But I always felt like, you know what, like if I were ever to move over here, I would definitely be an ally, you know, to help you get the justice that you need to help fight against neocolonialism and all this type of stuff. That's just my mentality. My mentality wasn't coming over there just to see how I could enrich myself, you know, and to your politics be damned. Like, for righteous cause, that's because that's who we are. That's who our tribe is. We are freedom fighters, period. Right. But now when we talking about not the down ballot strategy, but the down south strategy, right? We're talking about now you can really have a place where you can ally, and we can have aligned interests, and really the majority of Black immigrants, largely outside of New York, the majority of them are moving to the South, right? But what we're talking about is not new immigrants moving to the South. We're talking about immigrants already in other states and moving and making sure that your voting interests are going to be aligned so we can get some type of power, you know. Now that's a conversation we need to have, because I don't even think that the mentality is there. Like, it's not in alignment. Like, that's something that needs to be addressed and they need to fix and all that kind of. That's a whole different dynamic when we think about what's going to happen. But just like other groups find ways to you know, where they have an alignment of interests to come together, you know, that needs to happen too. He continues. It says, consider this: in the first census after the Civil War, 3 southern states, South Carolina, Mississippi, and Louisiana, were majority Black. In Florida, Blacks were less than 2 percentage points away from constituting a majority. In Alabama, it was less than 3 points. In Georgia, just under 4. But as previously noted, during and after the Great Migration, the percentages plummeted.
What page you reading from, brother, man?
Oh, that was page 30. That was page. This is page 31 now, right now, 31. It's the beginning. It's the beginning of chapter 2. It's the beginning of chapter 2. So it says, but as previously noted, during and after the Great Migration, the percentages plummeted. Black births in those states barely kept pace with the departures, so the black population was stagnant as the white populations boomed. In Alabama, for instance, the population was roughly evenly split between black and white in 1880. When the migration ended in 1970, whites outnumbered blacks in the states 3-1. This is true for the South as a whole. From 1910 to 1970, the black population in the South grew only by 36%. The white population swelled to 2.5 times its 1910 size. Now imagine an alternate scenario. Pay attention. If the Great Migration hadn't happened and those black people had remained in the South until the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, it is possible that African Americans would dominate the politics of the Deep South. They could control or be the driving force in electing as many as 12 U.S. senators. Considered another way, 44% of black people in America now live outside the South. However, hypothetically speaking, if just half of them moved back to the South and were strategically arrayed, it would be enough to make black people the largest racial group in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina, and a contiguous band of black power that would upend America's political calculus and exponentially increase black political influence. There were only, I think you might have touched on this already, Naheem. So I won't get into
I read
that.
this earlier.
Yeah. So I'm gonna stop it right there because he's talking about we could easily control. We would have the numerical majority without any other group really to dominate the politics in those states in the Deep South. Like that is seriously like moving the needle in terms of us being able to get to the power that we need to, like, if you understand how the Jim Crow Southern Democrats control politics and held up politics, right? Held it hostage till they got what they wanted implemented. That was through them controlling the South, right? You talking about the New Deal policies, cutting us out. That was because the Jim Crow, the Southern Democrats control, right? If you want to talk about the anything, you know, a lot of legislation. It's so much that they wielded, so much that they held power. And let's talk about, because when people want to say, well, is there precedence for this? Yeah. Have you ever asked yourself how Bernie Sanders, a progressive, what we call progressive leftist, hippie type dude, how he got in power? Huh?
Independent, not necessarily a Democrat, just caucuses with them.
Right. How was he able to win in Vermont? You know, how was he able to? And Vermont is like one of the whitest states in the country, right? How was he able to do that and get in office and hold those positions there, but and have his positions, his political views or whatever the case may be, and still hold that spot for all them years? Well, it goes back, and I'm not going to read the section in the book, but just to give you a quick snapshot, it was a drawn out plan. After the Vietnam War protests, and he actually, what I'm going to do is just read you a quote from the beginning of chapter 2. It says, it says, what we advocate is the migration of large numbers of people to a single state for the express purpose of effecting the peaceful political takeover of that state through the elective process. And that's what they did in Vermont. The hippies, pretty much, they wanted to get their power. So what they did is they strategically moved to a state where they can do that, and that state was Vermont. And that's how you have Bernie Sanders as the senator and Patrick Leahy as both of those are long-time senators, so there's precedent for that. And so what we're saying is we need to have are people who are experiencing way worse conditions in the North than they otherwise would have in the South. The degradation, we're talking about dilution and erasure and absorption through gentrification and mass incarceration, and they ship you off to a red district, and now you don't even have the voting power, right? That's what's that? What did they call that? I call that, what do we call that, man? Prison gerrymandering. We talking about all of these things, right? We talking about no industrial base, there's no jobs. You know what I mean? Cost of living is housing. So what we're saying is, those are the push factors. Now what we want to probably talk about next on another discussion is the pull factors to the South. What will be some of the factors that will pull our people? Because we got to get congressional power. If we have never elected popularly or by plurality anybody to Congress, and we're losing political power. Because understand, you can't import no more Freedmen, descendants of Freedmen. You can import everybody else, but you can't import any more of our folks. And we have crazy abortion rates. You know what I mean? We got the highest incarceration rates. We're losing power. What is going to be the solution? The only solution that makes sense is what he's talking about in his book, whereas we relocate strategically to places where we can get power, just like those people in Vermont did. Now, we got to get into how to make that a reality, but this is a very, very powerful plan. So I hope that we can have more discussions on that in the future.
Indeed. Now, before we get up out of here, I mean, it's just so much to touch on. I want to get into his reparations claim. I asked Josh to give a screenshot from out of the ebook or the Audible. I guess ebook is still a proper term. Not Audible, Kindle, excuse me. So I thought this was, let me read it. He says, do you know what page this is exactly? From I know
hold on. Let me tell you. Give me a second. 133.
Okay, page 133. According to Kindle, sometimes your Kindle version and your physical copy versions don't match up. So he says this about reparations. He says reparations is a mountain with two peaks, one moral and one legal. In the first instance, the white majority must be convinced that it is morally right for America to atone for its sins of slavery and oppression. I kind of took issue with that, but we had a discussion about that earlier. I guess my mind was changed a little bit. That's why I got smart friends, man. The second, and I'm gonna give my reason. I'm gonna give my reason to that first part about changing the minds of white America. He continues, in the second and even more difficult ascent, the Congress must pass and the president must sign a bill authorizing it in whatever form it may take. That is, unfortunately, a near impossibility considering our current politics. I don't disagree with that. But one way to make it more tenable is to send more senators to Washington for whom it is a priority. That's where we agree, right? Barring that, gaining control of states could allow for reparations on a more local level rather than federal. That part right there, no. The state's government do not have the capacity to mete out reparations because that last line assumes, I guess we could say even presupposes, that everybody is just going to move from the north to the south and be eligible for these state-issued reparations, right? No, we can't do that. Only the federal government has the capacity, as it has shown in this past year, by producing $5 trillion out of thin air, most of which, particularly in those first two packages, went to large corporations, right?
That's right.
So let's go back up. Let's go back up. In the first instance, the white majority must be convinced that it is morally right for America to atone for its sins of slavery and oppression. As a reparationist, I look at his sentence where he says, but one way to make it more tenable is to send more senators to Washington for whom it is a priority. That sentence cancels out and this is my opinion, and we discussed it earlier, and but anyway, it cancels that out, because if we control 12 senatorial seats, we have the whole Congress in a vice grip. Nothing moves without our legislation moving. I did a tweet the other day. I was zoning about this idea, about this book, about our people moving from the north to the south. I say it may, when I think about the practicality of it, because in its current iteration as just an idea, it is impractical. The migration, I know Brother Cato Amir's in the chat saying, no, it's a great wave. No, it's still a lot of stuff. New York City has 3.4 million Black people. We need 22% of them to come down south. Other than that, they're going to stay put. They're going to stay put. But if we controlled 12 Senate seats, we can get reparations passed. I don't have to change the hearts and minds of racist America, because Blow speaks to that in the book. I got it bookmarked on one of these tabs, but he speaks to the fact he doesn't believe that the racism in America can be cured. We have to understand that this rejection of reparations is the byproduct of white supremacy that can be found on both sides of the aisle, right? It could be found on the neo-Confederate side, which is today's Republicans, and it can be found on the liberal side. Both majority reject reparations for our people. Go back and watch Bill Maher and Frank, what was his name? Bruni, a writer, I believe, for the New York Times, and Charlemagne on Bill Maher's HBO show, weekly Friday show that we touched on a couple weeks ago. You'll see this. Why can't we just give them education? Wasn't Obamacare reparations? You see, that's white supremacy talking right there. That is the liberal white that Malcolm warned us about, that Dr. King warned us about, that Charles Blow is speaking to in this book. And this is why I believe this type of conversation has to be had broadly. We have to examine all of the factors. Our job can't be convincing ardent racists that we should get reparations. Our job should be the push to obtain the political power, so much so that they have no choice. And that's how you do it. And it's still an uphill battle. Without those seats on the Senate, it's an uphill battle. But we know that the reparations discussion is more widely spoken about and written about right now than in recent history. You would have to go back to the times of Reconstruction to see the flurry of this reparationist sentiment in our media. Now we have whole books on it, From Here to Equality Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century by Dr. William Sandy Darity and A. Kirsten Mullins. We have whole books about reparations now, the history of economic, the economic exclusion that we received from racist America. So this idea is powerful. And I think we all see that. You know, I think we can see, we can envision how this plan is doable. I used to debate in the conscious circles. I still debate in them every once in a blue. And y'all know I come from out of the Moorish movement. So we used to always debate about the Moors and blackness. And I used to say, what is the Black Power plan? All y'all dudes do is talk about Egypt and Africa. None of what y'all say is effective here. It's just talk, it's just rhetoric. At least the Moorish movement under Noble Drew Ali, not the nonsense that we think is the Moorish movement, was political. The Moorish Science Temple of America basically took over Chicago between 1925 and 1929. Took over. They were the reason that the vote of the Moorish Americans was the reason why Oscar the Priest was one of the first House reps, first congressman that held office since the Compromise of 1877. That was because of the votes of, so I had something to compare. I had some footprints that were clearly cut. I could say Noble Drew, I could show that Noble Drew Ali was in Chicago making political moves. There's a picture with him surrounded by some of Chicago's top politicians. I said, where is your Black Power manifesto? All y'all talk about is the same nonsense, taking up guns and spilling blood and revolution. I said, y'all dudes ain't gonna throw a rock at a cop car. I used to say it all the time. Here, this brother Charles Blow, for all of my conscious community folk that'll be watching this, he just gave a Black Power manifesto unlike any other. And I think that you should all check it out because it's worth the read. It is a true Black Power blueprint, a true Black Power blueprint, not like the dude Reggie, because you know I wouldn't even be surprised if he said, "Hey, he stole my idea." No, you was talking about a whole bunch of African Wakandan stuff, brother. You wasn't talking this
was
right
talking
here.
about taken by force.
Without using those words, right? Yeah. So, you know, I wanted to touch on that, and I want to touch on one more thing out the book, and then we'll close out this discussion. We'll just recap, but I want to read from page 40 and 41. We'll close it out. We will be back on tomorrow, and we'll finish up the discussion. We want those of you who have read the book to come on and join the discussion. Also, remember next Thursday at 11 a.m., we will be interviewing the author himself, myself, Sister Cynthia, and I believe Josh is going to be on there. Brother Josh is going to be on there as well. So, you know, shout out to our Sister Cynthia. You know, she's screaming Chi-Town in the chat. You know, every time you say Chi-Town, boy, her and Logic. Anyway, let me read this.
Don't get into it about no pizza right now. I'm glad.
No pizza.
Y'all talking about some pizza.
You know, look, that goes into what Blow is saying about those of us who are more recently rooted in destination cities. We place so much emphasis on place. We screaming out New York, Chicago, you know what I'm saying? The Detroit, and we got a specific style that's different than the North. And these things have to be rectified in this understanding that we are one family. So when Blow says that there are two Black Americas, one in the North and one in the South, or one in these destination cities, again, when we're saying the North, we don't just mean the North, we also mean all the way out into California, places where we fled, where we ran out of in the South and got situated in. So let me read this and then we'll finish this up. He says, the moment that I realized that I could be a true insurgent in this space came in 2013. I was at the Ford Foundation for an all-day series of lectures called The Road Ahead for Civil Rights, Courting Change. Harry Belafonte addressed the room during the lunch session. He spoke in a low but sure raspy voice, diminished by age but deepened by solemnity. He was elegant, erudite, and searing. I craned my neck to see if he was reading from a prepared text. He wasn't. I was mesmerized. Everyone and everything else in the room receded. I don't recall the people with whom I was sitting or anyone's reaction. I was transfixed as if he were speaking to only me. And then, having offered the provocative assessment that then President Barack Obama had, quote, suffocated radical thinking, end quote, he posed the question, where are the radical thinkers? Oh, also Charles Blow's nice critique of Obama in this book is a worthy one. I say nice because my critiques of Barack Obama, I think, would come with a little more harsher language. But that's just me. You know, this man is he's educated in all that good stuff. But he really, in my opinion, smacks down Barack Obama in this book in a nice way, So Harry Belafonte asks this question, where are the radical thinkers? He continues, Belafonte is the epitome of the artist activist, not like Myson and them guys, having risked not only his career in service of social justice, but also his life. And he goes on breaking down this. Basically, they raised $70,000. They got to Mississippi. They had to escape. He and Harry Belafonte had to escape from the Klan. The Klan was trying to chase them and basically kill them. He says at the time, Belafonte and Portier were two of the biggest black stars in America. And even from that perch, they risked it all. So today's actors and what Nas says in one of his tracks, athletes today are scared to make Muhammad Ali statements. He says that on the track with Lil Wayne, and somebody else on Distant Cousins. I can't remember.
Yeah, My Generation.
Damian Marley. I'm bugging.
It's all My Generation.
My Generation, right. So he continues. He says, on the walk back to the Times' Midtown offices, Belafonte's query, where are the radical thinkers, kept replaying in my head. And it occurred to me that I have been thinking too small all my life about my approach to being in the world and conceiving my role in it. I had to remember that a big idea could change the course of history. And I was uniquely positioned as a writer, not only to express such an idea, but also to push it out into the world. That whole statement was powerful because if Mr. Blow is watching right now, do know that you have come across fellow radical thinkers, the ones that Harry Belafonte was trying to summon at a time where you couldn't criticize Obama, right? Tavis Smiley and what's the elder name, Josh? Tavis Smiley.
Oh, Cornel West.
And Dr. Cornel West. You couldn't criticize Obama. What was Al Sharpton's response? I'm not going to criticize Obama right now. I'll wait till he leave office. I paraphrase that.
Yeah, he sounded like he was one of the ones that would be highly objectionable to the down south strategy. He would be one of the elites in the North that would have problems with that. I'm just taking a wild guess.
Definitely. I mean, so we are those radical thinkers, family. What makes Be the Power different than several other groups is this, and I'll open it up to my brothers. We we come from, as you all can see, we come from several different places. Me and Ali from New York City. Brother Grimm is from Louisiana, New Orleans, to be exact. Brother Josh is from Virginia. We all come through specific schools of thought. Almost all of us, at some point, have been or studied the teachings of the Five Percenters, the Nation of Islam, Dr. Malachi Z. York, especially when he was Imam Isa and ran the Ansarullah Law School in Brooklyn. A couple of our brothers are Freemasons, Master Masons at that. I believe one of our brothers have even walked through the Shriner's degree. Very well-versed and studied men. And we study a lot of this information, and we bring it together from a perspective that is unique. So we were able to take that information from those schools of thought. Look at what was going on in the South. I know for me, when I read the teachings of Prophet Noble Drew Ali, it helped me understand certain things better. It helped bring me to a certain place about American history. Now, we've come to see that some of those things he wasn't right and exact on. And one day soon we're going to do, huh?
I said, go in, Ali. I was just joking.
Oh, we had like a 5-hour debate like 2 weeks ago. That was funny. Like we was on the phone for like 5 hours just getting it in. When we debate, family. And we, every once in a blue, we get into like a long debate. So we had it was a good debate. And I mean, literally, it was like 5 hours, literally. So, we bring a unique perspective. We're not scared to say what needs to be said. We don't care about no backlash, none of that. Like, it is what it is. Some of us are born and raised in the streets. We just don't care about, about certain stuff, but we have the wherewithal to take the advice from each other if we cross the line or go overboard, or if we're just wrong, and our peers and our elders, right? And we'll make the necessary adjustments if we're wrong or if we go overboard, et cetera, et cetera. So we are those radical thinkers. Think about this, fam. We have incorporated the Freedmen's movement last year, May 2020. We resurrected the term, and now we see that people are running with it because we didn't invent it. It's just ours. And that realization made other people say, damn, that is ours. Legally, it's on paper. Yeah, the Bureau of Freedmen Affairs need to be established in the same way the Office of New America is established, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And we're going to fight for that, and we're going to make it happen. These are the radical thinkers. And we just came across a radical work. This right here, coming from the most unlikely of sources, in my opinion, is a radical work. And you have to have a radical thought process to put this together. Here, another book from radical thinkers. Like, I'm going to always hold the YC. What she said, we was fools for calling this our Bible. I called it the Quran. The Reparation is Quran, YC. You know who I'm talking about and who I'm talking to.
Hey, real quick, what does the Quran mean? What is the word Quran?
The word Quran, from the root word, hope I don't say this wrong, Qara, has two meanings. One is to gather together, and the other means simply to recite.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about gathering together, and especially the gathering together part, and you see all that he gathered together in that work, hey, that term makes a lot of sense, right?
Oh yeah,
That term makes a lot of sense.
So let's open it up. Let's I don't know if our brother Ali is available to give some feedback on what he heard tonight. Brother Ali, you there? Yeah, our brother Ali is busy. You know, we want to give a shout out to our sister Riri, one of our BTP mods. She just opened up her restaurant, the Lobster Queen, out in Teaneck, New Jersey. If you are in the if you're in the tri-state area, go check out Sister Riri and the Lobster Queen. Go give our sister some business and let her know that we support her 100%. I'm vegan, so I don't eat no seafood, but I might take a date there. So if I'm in the area and anybody want to come hang out with your brother Naheem.
I didn't use it. I use this one.
Yeah, brother Ali.
Yo.
Yeah.
My bad. We debating over the size of the salmon patties, okay?
See, they in there. The debates are raging. The debates are raging. They debating over the how and you think about the salmon patties, right? I think that may be a Southern thing. I'm not sure. I think, that may be a Southern thing with the grits.
I'm sure it is, man.
Man, Riri say you making that thing too big, man.
She said I was making it too small. That's what she said.
Ali up in there like, I'm trying to cut costs. Sounded like the father from Everybody Hates Chris. That's an extra 5, 10, 15 cent worth of fish you putting on there. Girl, just trim this down. That's the flyer. Make sure y'all support our sister Riri, the Lobster Queen. The address is right there, 1122 Teaneck Road, Teaneck, New Jersey. If you are in the area, go support our sister, our fellow BTP mod. And Sister Riri done put in some work too. And one day we're going to bring Sister Riri on BTP, and we're going to have a good roundtable discussion about people that put in some work and put in real community work.
She's been involved with the Urban League. She's a member of the Urban League. She's a member of she's the president of the what? Of the guild. Okay, she's the president of the guild. What's the position at the NAACP? The educational liaison for NAACP. Between Bergen Community College and NAACP. And what's up with the 100 black women? What's the deal? Huh? Something about the 100 black women. I don't know. She's something with the 100 black women. What you did with the Chamber of Commerce? African American Chamber of Commerce. She hooked up with them too.
Mm-hmm. Tell her people in the chat are saying she needs a vegan option. She needs some vegan options. I'm one of them.
Vegan option, Ree. You need a vegan option. Huh? She said she's going to do that.
That's right. That's what's up. So y'all see, our sister Riri is not just a chef. She's also very heavily invested in the community with several different organizations. So we're not playing around, family. We are those radical thinkers that Harry Belafonte was looking for. And in the spirit of his activism, we're going to make sure that the job gets done. In the spirit of the ancestors that I have behind me, Blanche, Bruce, Hiram Revels. And I mean, do I even got to say the man name in the middle? We're going to make sure Bruce Blanche, excuse me, I said it backwards. We're going to make sure that the Freedmen legacy is carried out because it disappeared. It disappeared. And when it disappeared, they felt they didn't have to do anything for us anymore. But do not fret. Your descendants are here. And we're going to get this thing done. Brother Ali, did you have anything so far that you heard so far? I know y'all busy in there, but was there anything that stood out to you?
Everything stood out to me. That means I wasn't really listening. I was listening, but I wasn't listening.
I
So
feel
heard,
you.
everything stood out. How Fat Five Freddy said, everybody's fly. Yo, everybody's fly.
Everybody fly, fam.
You know? Nah, I don't know, man. I mean, listen, man. I think for me, I'm just excited that the brother Charles Blow even agreed to sit down and have the conversation with us. I'm proud of that fact. You know, that's a great for me, that's a great accomplishment. You know, because it's a, you know, from everything that I'm hearing, I did not read the book. I haven't had time, but just from what I'm hearing, you know, it's a fantastic book with some really great ideas. I saw some, you know, I heard some of your pushback points in terms of local reparations versus federal, you know, but that's what a lot of people don't understand that aspect of it. So that's our job. That's what we're here for, is to really get people to understand, you know, the difference in what they're calling local reparations versus what federal reparations actually is. So other than that, man, I think you guys did a great job from what I heard.
Yeah, honest, bro. Let's go to Brother Grim. Grim, you know, give a recap and a breakdown of the book and tonight's. You know, obviously we couldn't hit on everything. I got pages of stuff that I want to talk about with this joint, right? Like we all literally can do a whole 2 to 3 hour program by ourselves just on this book alone. But you know, that's why we're going to come back tomorrow night. We're going to talk about it and open it up to those who have read the book. I might even possibly do a clubhouse tomorrow on it as well. I might even go on Clubhouse tonight and talk about it, to be honest. So I don't know. But go ahead, go in, brother Grim.
Hey, peace. I would love to be around my own people. Just giving a recap of the book. Does that mean that I'm a segregationist? No. And I basically agree with Charles Blow on his breakdown of that. And this thing, if we do this thing, or if people do this thing and we start having a mass migration south, it's going to affect American policy that to me in such a manner that it would make America one of the most thoughtful and moral nations on the planet Earth. Because the morals of the descendants of freedmen and those who were in prior servitude was superior to that of the people that held us in bondage and the people that controlled power in this country. If we was able to formulate local governments, so to speak, that were powerful in regions that affected policies in states and whatnot, you know, and on a federal level, yielding 12 Senate seats like Josh was breaking down from Charles Blow's book, you know, it would change the face of foreign policy. It would change the face of war. It would change the face of health and human services. It would change the environmental. We can't pass that up because it seems like a lot of these people understanding is rooted in money and power. And they don't give a good goddamn how much poison they pump in the land, air, and sea. Just as long as that goddamn green keep rolling. And I believe that our moral voice, meaning the moral voice of the descendants of freedmen and our allies, would change this country, man, for the better. And like Charles Blow said, we're not creating, or we don't desire to create, so to speak, a black supremacy, but we seek to unroot white supremacy. So we're not changing one hierarchy to another. We just we are expelling and taking power away from the evil hierarchy. So this is a beautiful book, man, to begin to say it. Not only that, but all these issues that we have with black people who living in pockets. It may be like a small black community surrounded by a gigantic white community in these states whose political votes and political voice don't mean anything, you know, whose political education has gone by the wayside. If you come south and do what this man's saying, we could change the dynamic, and your words and your voice will have power, you know, and you'll be able to live out the things that you desire to live in a culturally accommodating place. See, white people have always had safe spaces for their ingenuity and their creativity, but we haven't always had that. Like he was saying in the book, they was always able to paint themselves as the hero. And our story was always told from a dynamic of constant struggle. And we can change all those dynamics, you know. And if you're doing, like he said, if you're doing fine in the north, by all means, stay there. But if you having problems, man, look, I done met so many people in Louisiana from California that say they would never go back to California once they came here, you know? And that's not excusing the evils of the things that take place in the South. But a lot of people in these Los Angeles areas, these different areas of California, getting their asses handed to them, really. And then they come here and they like, wow, this is what's going on. You know, me personally, minus any natural disaster, I would never leave the South because, you know, other than the crime, the you know, that's going on in our communities and things of that nature, this is a safe space for me, man. And you can't dictate, meaning the liberal, the enemy, the white supremacist, you can't dictate to me where I need to be at when I have a safe space that accommodate me and my family and my children and things of that nature, man. The bottom line, man, is that we the moral conscience of this nation. Dr. King, and all of our philosophies and spirituality, man, whatever it is, always rooted to that, man. So with that, I say peace.
Indeed, indeed. Brother Josh, you'll give us a recap, a little breakdown before we get up out of here.
Yeah, man, I appreciated this book. You know, I'm glad that you put me on to it. You know, you first mentioned it, you know, and then I went and explored, like, yeah, I gotta have that, you know. I gotta have that. You know, I appreciate the brother Charles Blow for writing the book. Like I said, very superbly written book. I do have some other questions that I would like to ask him. And, you know, some other things that I feel like maybe were not addressed in the book, but, you know, we'll get to that. I look forward to hearing the family's perspective and questions and ideas. And I mean, really, it's something we should talk about. We should really build on. And, you know, I think we need to try to see what, as like people who are pushing and advocating and, you know, for building organizations and forming, you know, organizations and movements, etc. Not only nationally, but locally. You know, we need to really take this information into consideration and try to figure out, you know, like I said, it's the push and the pull factors. We got the push that's there, right? We know there's going to be if, you know, this thing gets starts to pick up some traction, it's going to be a reinvigoration of some pull factors trying to pull Black folks back, or keep Black folks pulled back from leaving, right? But I'm interested in seeing what kind of additional pull factors we can have and we can create or get incentive for those in these new southern destination cities, right? Or destination towns, counties, etc. We need to get pull factors see what pull factors they will be creating, right? Or that the federal government via Bureau of Freedmen Affairs, right, will be able to provide accommodation for. So I just got to say again, excellent book. I'm looking forward to having the discussion with the author. And shout out to everybody out there in the chat who read the book or not. Appreciate your feedback in the chat. I mean, if you haven't read the book, I would encourage you to get it. Also, I would encourage you to to donate to the United Sons and Daughters of the Freedmen. Please share the website. We're going to be adding more things to the website, more content, because right now, if you want to tell people where to go to see what we're asking for, to get some education, to learn about what the Freedmen history is, we need to have a site for that. So we have a site there. You can donate, but we're going to be doing our Freedmen reparations rally on, what is it, June? What is it, brother?
June 18th, 11 a.m.
Yeah,
at the state capitol in Atlanta, Georgia.
That's right.
One of them destination cities.
yeah, no doubt. So resources are necessary for that.
Hold on. Otis asked a question. We'll be interviewing him next Thursday at 11 a.m. Myself, brother Josh.
I think it's Tuesday, right?
Tuesday?
Hold up, my bad. I'm wrong. No, you right. Thursday.
Thursday at 11 a.m. OG Otis. Yeah. What?
So with that, y'all, I appreciate everybody. Peace.
Peace, bro. Okay, so I mean, I couldn't wait to do this. This was something that, from when I heard the first interviews, that I wanted to. I gotta get this book. I got the book, read it, and again, I was blown away. Because one thing about me, anybody that knows me and knows my track record knows that I've always been a solutions-oriented individual. All of my interviews on Sonetta TV, if you go back and watch them, I don't care what we're talking about. I don't care what the debates are. I'm going to speak to solutions, period. What is the solution? How do we get from point A to point Z? Lay it out. Lay it out. I used to think that I had plans and solutions, and I would try my hand at them, because I'd be damned if I was going to sit there and go through this life and not do nothing or not try anything. That wasn't going to happen. And that's not what I was put here for. It's not what I was put here for. I was put here for a purpose. And we're living out a portion of that purpose right now. In this book, I mean, these two books that I have on my desk, From Here to Equality and The Devil You Know, have probably been the best two books that I've read outside of any spiritual, philosophical texts, maybe in my life, because it's centered on solutions, on things that are tangible. Both ideas radical. Both ideas, according to the majority of Americans, and I'm pretty certain if you polled them on Charles Blow's plan and asked them if they think it practical, they'd say no. Like, no, both these ideas are impractical. Reparations and black people moving back down south. No, Get out of here with that. How are you going to make this thing happen? And he speaks to some of that. And we're going to talk about that, some of that tomorrow night. But we now have in our hands, family, tools. We have tools now to start building real foundations with. Once they were able to eradicate the Freedmen's Bureau, the Freedmen's Acts, these were congressional acts. The ideas that were centered around freedmen that brought about Callie House's pension program idea. Once they were able to kill those things, they were able to kill the spirit of our freedmen ancestors. Till Dr. King came along, and while he didn't use that terminology, he was an embodiment of the abolitionists in the Reconstruction and post-Reconstruction era. The abolitionists that fought to have our people freed from slavery and then sought to, after slavery, have them employed, have the government give to them for breaking them, fixing them, because they broke them. And today, we are those abolitionists. Today, we are those reparationists. Today, we are the descendants of the freedmen. Make no mistake about it. Our roles are clear. Our role is clear. We don't do no showbiz stuff over here. Everybody that follows the Be the Power channel knows them brothers are real. Them brothers are serious. And now, we got tools in our hands, family. Shout out KS for the super chat. We got tools in our hands now. And these tools have already been used to give us the foundation to build upon. And that's where we need to put our focus. There may be some adjustments made along the way, some corrections. That happens when you're drawing up blueprints. But make no mistake about it. The building will get built. So let's build till we build buildings, family. Cut out any sucker stuff, because we don't do no sucker stuff over here. That's that New York. That's that New York talking right now. We don't do no sucker stuff over here, so don't bring that over here. Let's build until we build this building, family. Then we could live happily ever after. So tomorrow night, 8:30, our regularly scheduled time on our regularly scheduled day, we will be back with the discussion. For those of you who have read the book, we are opening up the platform for you to come on. So if you have read the book, come on through. Let's build on it. I may do a clubhouse tonight after we get off, or I may start a clubhouse room tomorrow so that we can build on it and see if we can get some more people to come on as well. And next week, 11 a.m., we'll be interviewing the author. People need to, from our walk of life, need to get introduced to this brother. It's too much separation among us. It's not just the North and the South and the East Coast and the West Coast. There's a bunch of things that separate us. But the fact that we are descendants of freedmen is the thing that binds us. I can look past everything else, especially if I disagree with it, but I can look past those things to that thing that we have in common. And that is the fact that we had ancestors who were enslaved on this land, and that we are the amalgamation of various African tribes, the descendants of freedmen. So I'll leave you all with the motto of the platform, which is, don't just fight the power, become the power. And then and only then will you have the power to make a change. And with that, I say peace.
Peace.